The hype around CJ Carr has been building since the day he committed to Notre Dame, a top 5 quarterback prospect with legendary bloodlines. He's seen as the future of the Notre Dame football program, but is the future now, or is he still a year away? It's coming right up on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and today is Tuesday, February 18th, and thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'd really appreciate it if you took a quick second to make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to podcasts, and today is part 3 of our 3-part series breaking down the quarterbacks competing for the starting job in 2025. I started this series last week, and in part 1, we broke down Steve Angeli's bid to be the starter, why he could win the job, why he might not, and how likely it is that he'll actually be the starter. And then in part 2, we did the same exercise for Kenny Minchey, and today we are turning our focus to redshirt freshman CJ Carr. I'm going to dive into why his talent and upside could make him the best option, why his lack of experience might hold him back, and finally, my take on whether Carr will actually win the job or if he's going to have to wait his turn a little bit longer. But let's get into the case for CJ Carr to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback. I think the first one is pretty obvious. He has the highest ceiling of any quarterback on the roster. He has 5-star traits across the board. He's basically the ideal size for a modern quarterback, 6'3" and a lean 210 pounds. He's very polished despite the fact that he is the youngest quarterback in the competition. He has a quick, easy release that's technically sound. You could just tell he's been trained really well, right? His grandpa's Lloyd Carr. His dad was a backup quarterback at Michigan. Like, football runs in their family. They take it very seriously. And you can just see in the way that Carr trains that he has been training to be a college quarterback, to lead a program for a very long time. This isn't something new. This has been something that he has been working for since really he was a little kid. And that is very clear in his progress and in his development as a quarterback who is still very young. He might not have the arm strength of a Josh Allen or a Jamarcus Russell, but he certainly has the ability to layer the ball, throw with touch, and he can really put the ball anywhere on the field. Like, he came out during pregame warmups before the national championship, and he was throwing darts on 25-yard outs. It was pretty funny listening to Tim Priester, friend of the program from Irish Illustrated, talk about watching CJ Carr just throwing in warmups. And this is a guy who had not really thrown that much over the past several months because he's been dealing with an injury. We'll get to that injury in segment 2. But he's very impressive, especially considering the fact that he is still so young. He just has a ton of raw talent, and that is evident every time he throws the football. Like, I made the point that Kenny Minchey might have the best quarterback aesthetic. I think he throws a very pretty looking ball, but I think Carr is the most consistently accurate of any of the quarterbacks on the roster. It's not just his throwing ability, though. I think he's got like the perfect skill set for a modern college quarterback. He's a polished pocket passer, but he also has the ability to extend plays and move the chains with his legs. Like, you can't really just have a pocket passer anymore at any level of football. I think that type of quarterback is sort of aged out of the game. You need to be able to use your legs, be an athlete, and Carr is certainly an underrated athlete. He's not going to be used a ton in the designed run game. It's not going to be like Riley Leonard, but he is certainly capable of keeping it on a read option, and he provides an element of unpredictability to the offense. Like, defenses will absolutely have to take into account his running ability when they're defending him because he can tuck it and run it. You saw that on his high school tape. He was more than willing to do that. We saw him in the spring game last year run a little bit, but he can make throws on the run. He can make throws off platform, and we saw that in the spring game last year. He played for both teams in that game, and he was really the story of the game. He finished 15 of 23 passing, 165 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. His touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert was probably the best play of the day because he threw him open and had to split 2 defenders who were bearing down on the receiver. Now, granted, we should point out that he wasn't playing the ones out there on defense, but still, it took guts to throw that ball, and then he executed it perfectly. He can loft the ball deep, but he also can throw a rope across the middle as well if he has to. And he hit Deion Colsey in stride across the middle on a play in the second quarter. It was actually really fun going back and rewatching a lot of the plays from that spring game, and you realize just like, wow, Notre Dame has so much talent in the quarterback room. And that is not something we could say just a couple years ago. Think back to 2022. things have certainly changed for that room, and Carr is another example of the young talent that they're bringing in to really improve that room as a whole. So I think when CJ Carr has the ball in his hands, like, he is in total control out there. There were times where he held it too long and got sacked, but he's never running around for his life, okay? And he's going to make some early mistakes. That happens, but I just love his command when he's out there on the field, and I think it's because he's poised and mature beyond his years. And he was like that as a true freshman. Now going into his redshirt freshman season, he's already shown leadership. He's shown that he's confident and that he has a high football IQ that could allow him to handle the pressure of being the starting quarterback right away. That is not easy. And as I mentioned earlier, he comes from a football family. His grandpa won a national championship as the head coach at Michigan. His dad was a backup. He understands what it takes to succeed at this level. He has seen it all of his life. Like, none of this stuff is brand new to him. It might be, the experience might be new, but he's seen it. He knows what it takes, and his entire life has been spent around the game. And you could tell from the way that he played in high school that he has a very high football IQ. They ran a pretty advanced offense for his high school in Michigan because he was capable of running it and leading his offense. And he also showed natural leadership ability when he was a recruit, because he was the leader of that class. And you always want your best player to be the leader, and that was certainly the case for CJ Carr in his recruiting class. And I think one particular moment really stands out to me. When Tommy Rees left to take the job at Alabama, that was a big blow to CJ Carr, because I know that everyone thinks that Tommy Rees couldn't recruit quarterbacks, and certainly he missed on a few of them, no doubt about that. But Tommy Rees and CJ Carr had a great relationship. Rees really wanted Carr. Carr loved Rees, and it felt like they were destined for a bright future at Notre Dame. But then Rees takes the job at Alabama, and I think that CJ Carr had to really reevaluate his situation because he had formed such a strong bond with Tommy Rees. But he had also developed a strong relationship with Marcus Freeman and believed in his vision. But around that time, that was when the whole Andy Ludwig debacle happened, and Notre Dame botched that offensive coordinator search on a very public level, right? We all remember that. That was not a whole lot of fun when Colin Klein turned him down, and then they bring Andy Ludwig to the hockey game. Everyone thinks it's going to be him, and then he doesn't get the job because of the whole buyout and all that whole thing. And then Notre Dame had to essentially settle with Jared Parker to be the offensive coordinator. And I don't imagine that CJ Carr and Jared Parker had a very long-standing relationship prior to that. CJ Carr could have wavered at that time, and maybe he did privately. Maybe he really reconsidered his options and whether or not he should go to Notre Dame because of the way that was handled. The first season under Marcus Freeman didn't go that well on the field because they went 8-4, and there were reasons for CJ Carr to have questions about the future of the Notre Dame program. He didn't know that they were going to be playing for a national championship in 2 years, but he didn't do that. He kept the class together. He remained steadfast in his belief in Notre Dame, in the direction that this program was headed. And not only that, he rallied the other recruits around him. And I think that says a lot about his character and also his leadership ability, because for whatever he was feeling internally about the situation, he certainly never let that get public. And he led the class the whole way, helped recruit other talented players to come to Notre Dame. And you love to see that, right? Because there was a moment last year when Notre Dame was recruiting Deuce Knight pretty hard, and it looked like he was the leader in the class. But then he strung them along, was taking all those visits to Auburn, but was not being fully transparent with Notre Dame. Like, that was a mess of a situation. That never once happened with CJ Carr, even though Notre Dame gave him reasons to waver. And I just think that really stands out to me, and the way that he handled that whole situation was just extremely mature. So it's not just his talent and his ability. I think that what he possesses just as a person and as a leader, like, that's what you need in a quarterback. And if Carr is truly the future of Notre Dame football, I think getting him on the field early could accelerate his development and set the Irish up for long-term success. Like, the best case scenario for CJ Carr, one that would be great for him and great for the Notre Dame football program, is that he follows the path of other great quarterbacks to come through college in recent years, like a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. Both players redshirted their freshman season, and then they came in as the starting quarterback in their second year as redshirt freshmen. They played 2 seasons of terrific football in college. Then they were the top players selected in the NFL draft. Bryce Young backed up Mac Jones in 2020. Then he started the whole season in 2021. And in that year, just his second year in college, he threw for 47 touchdowns, nearly 5,000 passing yards, and just 7 interceptions. CJ Stroud appeared in just 2 games in 2020, sitting behind Justin Fields. Then he won the starting job in 2021, threw for 44 touchdowns, 4,400 passing yards, 44 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Bryce Young became the first overall pick after his third season, and CJ Stroud was right there behind him at number 2 overall. This is the best case scenario, but it's also proof that you can come in as a redshirt freshman and dominate right away. Notre Dame has not had a quarterback drafted that high since Rick Meyer back in 1993, and they have not had a quarterback drafted in the first round since Brady Quinn in 2007. Carr might have the best chance to break that streak, and if he's able to beat out 2 guys who are older than him in just his second season, he might be well on his way to reaching that status. But as talented as CJ Carr is, we might have to pump the brakes on starting him as a redshirt freshman because there are some legitimate concerns about throwing him into the fire too soon, and we're going to break them down right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Get real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. There's a very legitimate case for CJ Carr to be the starting quarterback in 2025, and maybe that ends up happening. I just laid it out in the previous segment, but there is also a real legitimate case against him, and we're going to look into it right now. So the first thing, his lack of experience is a major concern. While he's not a true freshman, Carr has never taken a meaningful college snap in live game action. Can he handle the speed and the complexity of Power 4 defenses right away? Because Notre Dame opens the season on the road against Miami in what will be an extremely hostile environment. Brandon Wimbush crumbled under the pressure in that environment, and he was way more experienced than CJ Carr. And I understand that Miami might not be a top 10 team in college football this year, but they are talented. There are a ton of really talented players on that team, and we saw in 2017 just how much Miami fans hate Notre Dame and how much they get up for this game. It's going to be late August in Miami. It's going to be hot as hell, and the fans are going to be extremely loud, and that is a very, very difficult task to make your first college start. Then he would have to turn around and make his second career start against Texas A&M, who is led by Mike Elko, one of the best defensive minds in all of college football, in just his second start. Like, I don't care how talented you are, how experienced you are, that is extremely difficult, and especially to start your college career. And we know that Marcus Freeman prioritizes experience at the quarterback position. That's why he went out and he got Sam Hartman to start for the team in 2023, because he was like the most experienced quarterback in college football. Then he went out and he got Riley Leonard for this past season. He looked at what Notre Dame did at quarterback in 2022 and thought, never again. Now, granted, it's not just the lack of experience for Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine. They just weren't that good, but still, experience is something that Marcus Freeman talks about a lot, especially at the quarterback position, and CJ Carr has none of it. Does he trust a redshirt freshman to go out and make his first career starts against Miami, against Texas A&M? I'm not really sure about that. And obviously, if you're going to develop a quarterback in-house, they're going to be inexperienced when they start, right? There's no substitute for it. Freeman talks about that all the time. And maybe if Notre Dame opened up the season against like Little Sisters of the Poor or the School for the Blind, then maybe this would not be as big of an issue. But that's just not the case. And even elite young quarterbacks make mistakes, and they're a lot more prone to making those mistakes in environments like Miami to start the season and at home against a very tough defense like the one Texas A&M is going to have this season. And also Mike Elko is so smart. He knows exactly how to make life hell for any quarterback and confuse them, but especially one with such little experience. And does Notre Dame really want to risk early season struggles in a year where they have college football playoff aspirations and they're trying to get back to the national championship? It's a real question. It's a real concern that I have, and I'm sure it's something that the coaches are thinking about a lot, I'm sure. The second thing, and I really am surprised that this is not being talked about more. Like, his physical development was basically put on hold for an entire season. We know that he hurt his throwing elbow when he took a hit in practice leading up to the Louisville game. That game was in late September. He was not able to fully participate in practice from that point on, so late September, through the college football playoff. I kid you not, that is hundreds, maybe even thousands of extremely valuable practice reps that are just gone, okay? And sure, he looked good in the spring. He was around the team in the summer. He was there for fall camp and for the start of September. And yeah, he was running with the scout team, so it's not like he was running with the ones or anything like that. But he could not throw. When the media was in attendance for practice before the Indiana game, the first round of the playoff in December, he still could not fully throw. He would warm up, and then when the rest of the quarterbacks would run their drills, he would have to sit there and watch. So he missed out on all of October, all of November, and all of December, and he just had to sit there and watch. Meanwhile, Kenny Minchey and Steve Angeli, the two guys in front of him, they were getting all of those reps throughout that time. So the fact that CJ Carr missed out on all that time is a really big deal to me, especially when you consider the guys in front of him already have a head start on him. That's why I have some questions about some of the people who are like, oh, like CJ Carr is wowing in practice and the coaching staff is enamored with him. Maybe that happened in the spring, or maybe when they saw him work out in the summer, but there is no way the coaching staff could look at him not practicing in the fall and being like, yep, that is definitively our guy for the future. It just doesn't really work out that way. And sure, he had a ton of momentum after spring, but that essentially came to a complete halt once he suffered that injury. And there is a world where he could have beaten out Kenny Minchey and gone into this with as the number 2 guy behind Steve Angeli because of what CJ Carr did in practice throughout the fall, because they were basically just going back and forth on the scout team. But that could not happen because of his injury. And even though he's had a whole year in the strength program, he still needs to add size and strength to withstand the physicality of a full college football season. And he just wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to do really any upper body workouts because he could not use his right arm. And he's going to have to take some hits, and he's going to have to build that upper body strength. And will he eventually recover from this injury? No doubt. But the fact that he's not 100%, even at this point in time, like he's 95%, that concerns me, because that is just such a long time without being 100%. And the fact that he's been, not able to participate in everything, whether it be practice or all the workouts that they do, that is a real concern of mine. And you also have to just look big picture at the quarterback position and the recent history with young guys getting in early. Because for every CJ Stroud and for every Bryce Young, guys who come in and light the world on fire as redshirt freshmen, there are way more examples of big-time recruits who endure really poor starts to their careers, and some guys never turn it around. Drew Aller is a great example of a 5-star prospect who came in, was supposed to be the guy to lead the program to new heights right away. And even though he's a good college quarterback, it just certainly hasn't taken off like a lot of people thought it would at this point in his career. Drew Aller was a 5-star quarterback out of high school, was supposed to take Penn State to the next level, and then he got a shot as a redshirt freshman and was okay overall, but he was terrible in big games, awful. It wasn't just his stats. It was the fact that the coaching staff did not trust him to throw the ball down the field. He went 10 of 22 for 70 yards against Michigan that year, and then 18 of 42 for 191 yards against Ohio State. Now, he made improvements in his third season for sure, but we also saw in the Orange Bowl that he still got a long way to go. Speaking of Notre Dame opponents, Connor Wigman is another prime example of a 5-star recruit who just wasn't ready when his name was called. He got benched this past season for the Aggies. Now he's at Houston. And Connor Wigman was a really big-time prospect coming out of high school. Number 22 overall player in his class and the number 2 quarterback in the class of 2022, according to the 24/7 Sports composite. And I've said before that evaluating quarterbacks is the hardest thing to do in sports on the personnel side. You look at the NFL draft, quarterbacks who are taken in the first round bust over 50% of the time. And if you look at college quarterbacks and their evaluations from high school, it's about the same, if not more. The bust rate might be higher for the top 5 quarterbacks every year. Let's go through the top 5 quarterbacks in 2022. Cade Klubnik was number 1. That was a hit. Connor Wigman, bust. Ty Simpson, bust. Drew Aller, that's a hit. Walker Howard, bust. So of the top 5 quarterbacks in 2022, 2 were hits, 3 were definitive bust. Connor Wigman, Ty Simpson, and Walker Howard all transferred from the school that they committed to, and they have not made a dent in college football. Let's go back to 2021. Quinn Ewers was the number 1 overall quarterback in that class. He was a hit. Caleb Williams, bust. Kidding. He was a hit. Sam Heward, bust. Brock Vandegrift, bust. J.J. McCarthy, hit. That was a good year. They went 3 for 5. Let's go back to 2020. Bryce Young, hit. DJ Uyunglele, bust. CJ Stroud, hit. Hudson Card, bust. Jaquindon Jackson changed positions. That's 2 of 5. So in 2022, 2 of the 5 quarterbacks hit. In 2021, 3 out of 5. And in 2020, 2 out of 5. I could keep going, but you get the point. Just because you are a top 5 quarterback, which CJ Carr was a fringe top 5 quarterback in his class, that does not guarantee that you will be a star at the next level, especially not as a redshirt freshman. So when these teams do hit on the top 5 quarterbacks, usually they're home runs like Bryce Young or Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud. But more often than not, teams strike out. The Daytona 500 was this week. Let me get there. Let me land this plane. I've had to work on a lot more NASCAR lately during my day job, so I guess NASCAR has been on the mind as of lately. And as I was watching it on Sunday, it hit me. CJ Carr being a top recruit is like being given the fastest car on the track. It has all the tools to win, but success depends on the driver mastering the controls, navigating the course, and outperforming experienced competition. Talent gets you in the race, but it doesn't guarantee you will cross the finish line first. So if CJ Carr isn't the safest choice, does that mean he won't see the field in 2025? Not so fast, my friend. Let's break down how it all could play out right after this on Locked On Irish. The great thing about this competition is that if we do the same exercise that we did for part 1 and part 2, right? Close your eyes, think about the Notre Dame offense taking the field for the first time in Miami. Can you picture CJ Carr leading the offense? I think most of you, like me, can absolutely see that happening. And imagine the rush, right, of CJ Carr taking the field against Miami. Like, there's been so much hype around CJ Carr, and it started back in 2023 when he committed to this team, and you're thinking, okay, well, he's still got a long way to go. And there was a moment when people thought he might reclassify to try to accelerate his development. Well, that didn't happen, but now here we are in 2025. The CJ Carr era is here, and he's leading the offense. I think everyone could see that as a legitimate possibility, but I could also say the same about Kenny Minchey and Steve Angeli. As a matter of fact, they did in parts 1 and part 2. So what is CJ Carr's path to winning the job? The first thing he has to do, he has to outshine Kenny Minchey specifically in spring ball and make it a 2-man race. Because as I've said before, I really do not expect Marcus Freeman to name the starter after spring practice unless it is just so clear that one of these guys is superior to the rest. But then you risk losing 2 guys to the portal. So we'll just see what happens, right? But I think it's going to be a 2-man race after the spring, and whoever is in third place at the conclusion of spring practice is likely going to transfer. I can't say that with certainty, but I think that's probably how things are going to play out. So for CJ Carr, he has to demonstrate that he's more accurate, he's a better decision maker, and he is more composed in every competitive setting to separate him from Kenny Minchey. He has a lot of ground to make up on both of these quarterbacks because he's only been with the team for 1 year and he was not able to participate much at all in the fall. He doesn't have to beat out both guys, but he just has to move up to the number 2 spot so he has a chance to compete for QB1 in the fall. Because I know that everyone assumes, or I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people assume CJ Carr is just going to be the guy. Remember, when they start out in practice in the spring, he is going to be the 3rd quarterback to get reps because Steve Angeli has certainly earned the opportunity to be the first one to get the starting job, but then Kenny Minchey is right there behind him. So CJ Carr is going to be working from behind, not just for his career, but specifically in spring practice. But if he can make it a 2-man race going into the fall, then he could rely on his talent to take over. Like, his upside is undeniable. We've already broken it down in the show, but he has to prove that his ceiling outweighs the lack of experience that he has and the experience that Steve Angeli and his steadiness. He has to show that his ceiling outweighs that for Steve Angeli and everything that Steve Angeli brings to the table, which we've already gone over. The second thing he has to do is to master the playbook. He needs to show the coaching staff that he fully understands the offense and can execute it at a high level, both in practice and in the Jersey scrimmage in the spring game, because fortunately for him, he has spent the same amount of time in Mike Denbrock's system as all the other guys, even though he has spent less time in college. Like, Mike Denbrock has only had 1 full season with the offense, and CJ Carr was there from the start in spring practice. And given his background, and given his football IQ, this is one way that he can earn a leg up on the competition. The issue here is that Steve Angeli not only had to learn the system, but he had to prepare like he was going into the game every single week. That was certainly not the case for CJ Carr because he was hurt and he was the 4th string quarterback. But it also wasn't really the case for Kenny Minchey either, because even though technically he's 2 plays away. I don't think Kenny Minchey ever thought he was going to start a game this season, whereas Steve Angeli truly had to prepare every single week like he was the starter. And I really think that matters because there's just going to be more of a sense of urgency to understand the system front and back and understand the opponents. And I just think you learn more when you're preparing that way compared to Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr. So I think Angeli has the advantage there at the start, but if CJ Carr can fully master the playbook going into the spring, I think that is one way he can get somewhat of a leg up on these guys. The third thing he has to do to win the job, he has to embrace leadership. Because even as a redshirt freshman, Carr has to take command of the huddle. He has to earn the respect of his teammates, and he has to show that he does have the leadership qualities of a starting quarterback. Like the young guys on the roster, the freshmen who he came up with, the new guys, like they already know about him from his time as a recruit. But how is he going to win over the veterans? Because, a lot of those guys, they came up with Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchey. Well, CJ Carr can let his play do the talking in that case. But when he has his moments, he has to be in total control. And I think he will, because I don't think he gets rattled by these situations. And I'm sure that the guys who are, seniors, they want to see Angeli get his chance. But you know what they want more than anything? They want to win. Like Jeremiah Love is entering his last season of college football. He's going to be a top draft pick after this year. That guy wants to go out as a national champion. He's also friends with Steve Angeli. But Jeremiah Love is going to look at the situation. If CJ Carr does prove that he's the best option, then he's going to ride with Carr, and all the other veterans are going to do the exact same thing. So CJ Carr going to win the job. As we sit here today, February 18th, before spring practice, I think Steve Angeli is going to start the season, but Carr could and likely will take over the job in this season. Like I said, Angeli basically has a 3-year head start on CJ Carr. Maybe it's like 2.5, because even though Carr is only 2 years younger, he lost basically a full season due to injury. And Angeli has more experience and has actually shown that he can handle in-game situations. And I know the vast majority of the time it was garbage time, but Carr has not done any of that yet. And Notre Dame has historically leaned on experience at quarterback, and I think starting a redshirt freshman in a pivotal season is just a big gamble, especially when you consider the early schedule. It's not just Miami and Texas A&M, because if they get through those 2 games, then they got to take on Purdue, who they should destroy. But then they have to go on the road to face Arkansas, and then they have to turn around and play Boise State at home. And I understand that Boise State is a group of 5 team, but they were just in the college football playoff game. They had a bye in the college football playoff. And yes, Ashton Jeanty has gone to the NFL, but that is a good football program. And the coaching staff is probably going to trust Angeli more to start the season. But if Notre Dame loses a game, or maybe they lose 2 games, then they would be more willing to go to CJ Carr. Carr needs more time to fully develop, and I don't think Notre Dame is in a rush to get him on the field because they have an experienced option available. It might seem crazy, but this actually has happened before and worked. Look at Clemson in 2018. Kelly Bryant started the year off for the Tigers with true freshman Trevor Lawrence as the backup. Now, the difference here is that Kelly Bryant had already started a full season at Clemson and led them to the college football playoff. They lost to Alabama the year before, but when Trevor Lawrence came in, this was like the biggest high school recruit in years, and everyone was already raving about Trevor Lawrence before he even took a step on campus. Kelly Bryant started the first 4 games in 2018, and they started 4-0. They got a big win on the road against Texas A&M in week 2. Kelly Bryant started that game. He played really well in that game in a very hostile environment. But during those first 4 games, they also let Trevor Lawrence work in, and it became pretty clear that Trevor Lawrence was the best option, and then they went with him for the rest of the season. They went on to win the national championship. Kelly Bryant he redshirted after the 4th game. Dabo Swinney gave him that option. He ended up transferring to Missouri. Nobody really ever heard from him again. Trevor Lawrence became the first overall pick. I don't think Notre Dame would want to rotate quarterbacks at the start of the season like Clemson did. I think they would just let Angeli play until he lost the job. And if Angeli goes out there and say they start 3-2 before the month of October, then maybe they pull him for Carr. I think a lot of people would probably want that. And the good thing about the expanded college football playoff format is that 2 early losses wouldn't end the season for Notre Dame. It would obviously make things difficult, but when you look at the strength of schedule, they can get into the playoff if they finish 10-2. And if they start 3-2, make the switch, they win out with Carr, that team is in the college football playoff. Or if Angeli comes out, plays well, they start off 5-0, then everyone is happy because they're undefeated. Maybe Steve Angeli is like Kevin McDougal in 1993. Kevin McDougal waited his turn, and he led the Irish to an 11-1 record in his only year as a starter, while the young hotshot quarterback Ron Paulus had to wait a year, in part because he suffered a broken collarbone, but That's a perfect example of a quarterback who is not considered to be the future of the program, who came in with a very talented team around him and led the team to success. That team probably should claim a national championship, if we're being honest, but maybe that's a story for the summer when we don't really have much to talk about. But there's a real chance that Steve Angeli could have a season like Kevin McDougal. We all talk about that 93 team and that win over Boston College, but people often forget that McDougal was overlooked. He was overlooked by Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz was ready to start Ron Paulus. It pissed off a lot of guys on the team. But Paulus suffered a broken collarbone. McDougal came in and was really, really good during his only year as the starter. There's also the option that Angeli struggles and Carr shows rapid growth, and we see Carr take over before the season ends. This is going to be really fascinating to watch, and I'm very interested to see how Marcus Freeman handles this because he's never had to do it before, and it's not just picking a guy. You have to be able to manage the personalities in that room. Like Brian Kelly completely botched the quarterback situation in 2016. He could not pick between Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser, but he made it work in 2018. They started off with Brandon Wimbush at home, big game against Michigan. He was the more experienced guy. They win that game. Wimbush struggles in the next two games going up against Ball State Vanderbilt. They make the switch to Ian Book. They go undefeated in the regular season. They make the playoff. It's not necessarily ideal to have to play two quarterbacks, but it is possible. You can do it. You can have success. I think Notre Dame is actually going to do it this season, and how Marcus Freeman handles this quarterback competition and potentially a two-quarterback system is going to determine the success or failure of the season, and it's why we are going to keep talking about it all year long. So that's going to do it for me today, and that'll do it for the quarterback series. But trust me when I tell you, this is only the beginning. This race could and likely will look a lot different after spring practice, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. Make sure to tune into tomorrow's show. We are going to talk about Notre Dame's new general manager and where the personnel department is headed under the new leadership. We also have to talk about Micah Shrewsbury having an absolute meltdown at the press conference on Sunday after the loss to Louisville. Wasn't planning to do more hoops this week, but he has given me no choice. We're also going to be doing another mailbag on Friday, so get those questions in. You can drop yours below in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on social media. X account is @LockedOnIrish. Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod. You can slide in the DMs there. Also, if you enjoyed the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. And have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody. I will see you tomorrow.